Hey guys, welcome back to For the Classical Guitarist. My name is John, and in this video I want to talk to you briefly about the three writing styles of the famous Paraguayan composer Agustin Barrios, this guy right over here. So let's get started. So the first thing that I want to say is that this video is not going to be a history of Agustin Barrios kind of video. I mean, I might go over some historical things as they might pertain to how he was writing his music, but if you want a more in-depth video, let me know in the comments and maybe I can do that in the future. So the first thing that you want to know is that Barrios was alive from 1885 to 1944. So technically he is a 20th century composer, but because he was born in the end of the Romantic era, he was actually very influenced by composers like Chopin, Beethoven, and Schumann. Now, like I said before, this video is all about his writing styles, and Barrios actually had three of them. And those writing styles were imitative, folkloric, and religious. So let's talk about the imitative first, because I find that the most interesting, because that really ties deeply to when Barrios was alive and when he was composing. So like I mentioned, he was influenced by the greats Beethoven, Chopin, and Schumann, because they came just before him. However, he was also influenced by composers like Johann Sebastian Bach. It's said that Barrios was so influenced by their music that he would even take their pieces and arrange them for solo guitar, not even to publish as arrangement, but just for his own pure enjoyment. A piece that comes to mind in his imitative style would be his Homage to Taraka. Now, we of course know who Taraka is. That would be Francisco Taraka, who wrote famous pieces such as Recuerdos de la Alhambra and Lágrima. What Barrios did in his Homage to Taraka is he took the piece Lágrima and wrote a set of variations inspired by that piece while using that piece as written as the theme. In this piece, Barrios is not only showing his appreciation for Taraka and his music, but also is showing his total mastery and understanding of playing the guitar as well as writing for the guitar, as it is so brilliantly written. And another piece that comes to mind in this style would be his famous Julia Florida, also sometimes known as his barcarola. So a barcarola is a way to describe a folk song that was commonly sung by Venetian gondolas. So this style of writing was very common by composers of the Romantic era, and like I mentioned before, Barrios was very influenced by composers of the Romantic era. So if Chopin was writing some very popular barcarolas, so did Barrios. As I'm sure you can guess by the title of the piece, it was definitely written for a woman of some kind, and because of that, it's even sometimes known as Barrios' equivalent of Beethoven's Für Elise. So the next style that I'm going to talk about is actually the style of two of Barrios' most popular pieces, but ironically, it's the style that he actually seems to have written the least in, at least as far as I know, and that would be his religious style. Barrios being from South America in the 1900s, religion definitely played a huge part in his upbringing as well as his culture overall. So because of that, he wanted to pay homage to his religion when he could. A piece that comes to mind when really thinking about his religious aspects, of course, would be the piece Una limosna por el amor de Dios, which roughly translates to an alm for the love of God. This piece is known as one of Barrios' most popular pieces. Sometimes it's also titled as the ultimate tremolo piece or the final tremolo piece because it was his final piece he wrote before he died. Now, if you already know the backstory to this piece, I apologize, but long story short, Barrios, towards the end of his life, when he definitely knew he was getting closer to his end, was at home when an old beggar woman came to his door and knocked. This can be symbolized in the piece through the opening bass notes, which almost sound like a haunting and eerie knocking. And when he opens the door, she asks for spare change and starts to sing a song in exchange for hopefully some money from him. After this exchange, Barrios went down and started to write down the notes for this piece, where the melody is based off the song that she sung, and the bass line throughout is meant to symbolize her knocking. The piece starts off in a minor key, which is what gives it that sad and almost kind of haunting mood. But as the piece develops, we transfer over to a major key, and it resolves very nicely. It's said that this was meant to symbolize Barrios' acceptance of death and him being ready finally to go on to whatever he deemed as the afterlife. And it was appropriate because this was the last piece that he ever wrote. Now, the other piece that lands in his religious style also lands in his imitative style as well, and that piece would be La Catedral. The connection to the religious part is pretty obvious by the title, but the connection to the imitative part has to do with what happened when he was in that cathedral. So in 1914, Barrios wrote this piece after visiting the Cathedral of San Jose in Uruguay. And when he was in there, it was the first time he really heard the music of Johann Sebastian Bach being played on the organ. The imitation of this can clearly be heard in the second movement titled the Andante Religioso, where Barrios is using the guitar almost in a very organ-like way to symbolize the voices and the chords moving in the way that they would on the organ. In the third movement, the Allegro Solome, you really hear Barrios using his imitative style to copy the same way that Bach would have had, with moving lines and contrapuntal figures throughout. Instead of trying to describe it, I'll just play a second of it so you can hear exactly what I'm talking about. Now for the final writing style of Barrios, we have his folkloric style. Now in this style, there's actually tons of pieces that he wrote, but unfortunately I can't go over all of them, so I'm going to talk about just one or two, and maybe that'll be a separate video for another time. Now in this writing style, he wasn't only paying homage to his own country, Paraguay, but he also wanted to pay homage to other South American countries by using elements from their folk music. This can be seen in his piece Cueca, which is a piece that's meant to show the traditional Chilean dance, the cueca, as I'm sure you can guess. So the cueca is the national dance of Chile, and it's a dance between a man and a woman, but they never touch. So it's almost very flirtatious, but just before it gets too close, they separate again, and get close again, and then separate. This can be heard in this piece by Barrios, especially right here. Later on in the piece, as well as a handful of other pieces, you see Barrios also use the tambora effect. This is an effect where it almost tries to imitate the sound of a drum by hitting the strings of the guitar down by the bridge. It sounds something like this. Alright, so that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you're still here, if you liked what you saw, go ahead and give this video a like and drop a comment down below. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if there's any topics that you want me to cover in future videos. And if you want, go ahead and check out some other videos on my channel. You can see suggestions over here up on the sides of the screens. And if you really like what you see, consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Check me out on Instagram as well as other social media platforms. All of them will be linked down below in the description, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.